Gurave Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadale Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadbhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhuve Vacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Shri Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dandavat Pranam, devotees, Vaishnavis, Maharajas. Before I begin, I want to offer my Koti Dandavat Pranam onto the lotus feet of my Guru Parapadma. Nitya Lila Praveshta Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Paribraja Gajaja Ashro Tarasata Sisimat Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. On to my Param Guru Dev, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Paribraja Gajaja Ashto Tarasata Sisimat Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai and Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Paribraja Gajaja Ashto Tarasata Sisimat Srila Acharya Keshari Srila Bhakti Pradhan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. On to our entire Rupa Nuga Guru Varga. So, somehow or another, I've been able to have the consistency to stay with these each day. After I finish my morning program and study and everything, I'm having time to do these videos. So this is installment number 9. And I'm hoping that last installment number 8, which was about Zambia, I hope there was some clarity because I had gotten the sequences a little reversed and everything, but I think I corrected that. And I'm going to add a few other little details that I remembered and kind of put everything in perspective. So if you're listening to this in any kind of sequence, it'll be easy to go back and kind of get a general idea anyway. And the whole idea of this presentation was mainly to tell some of the stories as well as the preaching. In the biography of Pujapad Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, a lot of these things are narrated too, surrounding his life, his biography. And so some of the things are also mentioned there. So that's the best reference. The book Black Lotus, which was written by Sriman Satyaraj Prabhu with the approval of Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj and Ekavir Prabhu Brajalila and others, to illuminate the life of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj and how much he touched so many people, and of course how he was the sort of inspiration of the unfoldment of the preaching in Africa. Even those temples which had already been established, like Kenya, they were re-inflamed once he took to the mission of Africa. Of course, West Africa and Central Africa, they were completely under his inspiration. And then in Kenya, it sort of reignited, even though Kenya had a temple and everything. There's a very tremendous speech he gave. I don't know if it was at the opening of the temple or for one occasion in which President Mandela had attended, and he gave a very amazing speech that was, sort of iconic. And I know it's online. And so, his overall inspiration to not Africa only, but the entire thrust of so many devotees in bhakti all around the world. So, and also his God brothers. Also, I don't know if many people know, and I don't know if I'll get to narrate these things. I've tried to focus on Africa, but obviously after we came back from Africa, there was a lot of things that took place. And I don't know how much, and the reason I'm bringing this up, it's not really in the context of the Africa preaching, but I don't know how many devotees know that really the sort of pioneer of ideals around conflict resolution, leadership, working with devotees, bridge preaching, I don't know how many devotees know that actually Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, and I firmly, am convinced and with conviction speak this, was the pioneer of that. I mean, now you have many other versions of it and different variations of bridge preaching, but he was the pioneer of that. And he had done so much research into how to do it and everything else. And I think a lot of temples all around the world have used this model of creating different kinds of bridges to go out and preach and so forth and so on. So that should be made clear. I want to go back now and add a little section that was missing. I think we left off with the preaching in Zambia, where we had gone back prior to getting a permanent place, and it talked about where we had stayed in the house of one expat Sri Lankan engineer, how our car got stolen. After that, we didn't immediately, that family, when they came back from Sri Lanka, they wanted to help us. And I think they had arranged an apartment for us, but actually prior to that, they had arranged for us to stay, because I think the apartment was not ready. But they had arranged for us to stay with another expat gentleman who was an engineer, but he didn't have his family here with him. And actually he wasn't an engineer, he was an accountant. And he didn't have his family here with him. His name was Mr. Rao, and I do want to mention him because he was very much influential in helping us during an interim period where we couldn't really go out to preach and do a lot of things. So he introduced us to a lot of preaching in the Indian community, the expat community. Like I mentioned, the Gujarati community was the business community, the resident community there in Zambia. But the expat community was extremely large as well. And that's people who came over to work in Africa in different industries and so forth and so on. So Mr. Rao, I think he was an accountant. There were two people I think who were accountants, Mr. Rao and Mr. Takaji, who, I told you his wife, I'll explain more about that later, was the one who helped me to really learn Devanagari well and so forth and so on. So anyway, after this family came back and, they introduced us to Mr. Rao, he invited us to all stay, myself, Brother Leela, Raivatamuni, and Ishwara, to stay at his house, while we didn't have a place, or while the apartment, was being prepared. So anyways, that's what we did. We stayed with Mr. Rao for quite some time. And, we would cook prasadam there and give him prasad. And sometimes he would cook some South Indian things for us also. We'd offer everything. And he arranged a lot of programs within the South Indian community. There were a few families, and I'm going to mention them. I can't remember all by name. The ones I can remember by name, I will. And if not, I will point out by community. So there was one family from Pune, right, near Bombay, and they were worshippers of Vittala, who's in Pandharpur. And they used to actually sing one bhajan, which I kind of incorporated because I really liked it. Panduranga Vittala, Panduranga Vittala. It was like one of their bhajans that they would sing, so it was really nice. I think the family's last name was Gyana or something like that. Gyana or something like that. And it was a really sweet husband and wife. Their children were not there. I don't remember what he did, frankly. But we used to do programs at their house, and they would invite other members from that community. And they were very nice programs. And I remember they used to make very interesting, while I'm talking about this, I'll talk about the nature of the variations of dishes that they would make. So they would make various dishes from their locales. And this particular family, they made for us one time a complete meal from the banana tree. So it had the inner core of the banana tree, right? There was a kind of subji made out of that, something made from the banana leaves, right? And then they sprouted mung dal, they cooked it so just it was sprouted. Not maybe cooked it, but they sprouted it anyway. It was soft. And they made another subji out of that. Then they would make dal and a little rice and everything. So that was a very interesting family. And they were very studious as far as, studying Vedanta. And from him, I got like a peep into wanting to study more about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, because he studied them. And, his Sanskrit was very good also. So it was very interesting preaching with that family. Another family we met was Bal Subramaniam, and they were from South India. I think they were from Chennai, actually. Oh, were they from Chennai? Yeah, they were from Chennai, Madras. And there was a whole large South Indian, including Mr. Rao, South Indian community. And of course, food-wise, I don't know why I'm always jumping to food first. I never eat in the mornings here. Maybe that's why I don't eat until afternoon. So anyway, they would make all of the South Indian preparations: idli, dosa, samba, vada. So they make everything. And then there was one other family that was from Madras. I can't remember their name, but the wife was always really kind to us, just super kind. And she would give us all kinds of recipes that we could use if we wanted to make South Indian dishes. And she would also give us the simplified version that we could use according to the materials we could get there in Zambia. So anyway, Degalishan, that was the family's name, Degalishan. So anyway, she used to also make for us, and she'd make it in batches, idlis with groundnut chutney. And what she would do was she would harvest fresh peanuts and curry leaves, mustard seeds, coconut oil, cilantro, and green chili. And she would blend everything up, and that was like a groundnut chutney. Then she'd make coconut chutney with yogurt, coconut, cilantro, a drop of sugar, salt, salt also in the coconut chutney. And then she'd make a huge batch of idlis for us. And so I remember we'd have programs with them, and the music from South India is very different from Hindustani or North Indian music. So their bhajans were quite different. Now, Mr. Bal Subramaniam, his son was there going to the university. And he was very proud of this boy. And he was really sweet, really sweet. But he was an excellent percussionist, in Indian traditional percussion. He played tabla, he played gatam, the clay pot from South India. But it was also the first time that I'd really seen the playing of the kanjira. Now, I have a couple of kanjiras, and I actually studied kanjira a little bit with a very famous percussionist here. This was obviously much later on. But he was the first person to introduce me to playing kanjira. And the reason it's so nice is because a kanjira is a very small, round frame drum. And in the frame of the drum, there is one, almost looks like a tambourine clapper, right? So when you play it, you get the sound of a drum and at the same time karatels. So I remember one of the preaching trips that we took here, I took the kanjira with me, and when we would do bhajans, if there was no mridanga around, or we were just like in our hotel room, we didn't want to make a lot of noise or something, we'd do our bhajans and I'd use the kanjira. So he was the first person I saw play it, and when they would do their bhajans, his playing of kanjira and everything, it was just like super, super sweet. Of course, there was a Bengali community there as well. And Mr. Day, I think his name was, he actually was some kind of textile person or something. He ran some kind of textile something or nothing, or something like that. But anyway, his family, they were a Bengali family. And one thing obviously about preaching in the Bengali community was they were very familiar with Mahaprabhu. So they were so happy, for us to be there. And they would have programs, and they would invite everybody. Generally, each community had their own large network, kind of. So when you did a program, it was pretty exclusive to that community. Sometimes you'd have larger programs where everybody would be there. But Gujarati community had a lot of people, Bengali community, South Indian community. The North Indian community, generally, I don't know, for some reason, they would be more apt to invite other people, even though there were, quite a few of them as well. Anyway, so the programs we do at the Bengali community were really sweet because you could just go through the songbook of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Narottam Das and so many Bengali bhajans we could sing, and they really, really appreciated it. And of course, it was very natural for us, right? So, of course, can't leave without mentioning food. So they would make all classic Bengali dishes, the fried eggplant, and this is where I saw the ladies, I saw it in India as well, but when they use mustard seeds, they actually soak them a little bit in water, put them on a roller, and they roll them out and actually crush the mustard seeds. and used them like that in their preparations. They made sweets like chum chum and other kinds of Bengali sweets and stuff. So it was really just all around. The preaching in the Indian community was really good, and Mr. Rao was our facilitator like that. He actually drove us around because remember our car got stolen. So he pretty much, he'd go to work, but everything else he did was around service, chanting, and he was also chanting now and taking us to various programs. So pretty much it was like, and he was happy because his family was not there, and this was a chance for him to be engaged and, have people staying in your home all the time. So I guess it sort of made some fulfillment to the loneliness he may have felt with his family still being in India, etc., etc. So anyways, I think we got to a point where it was time for Brajalila to come back to do the Christmas marathon here. At the same time, the apartment was getting ready. So Brajalila, she came back to the States, I remember, to do the Christmas marathon. And we shifted from Mr. Rao's house over to the apartment. Now, I don't know if Brajalila initially came to that apartment. I think she did, actually. She initially came to the little apartment that we ended up getting before she went back to America for the marathon. So anyways, the apartment was kind of small. I mean, there was like 2 bedrooms and there was only 1 bathroom. Then you had like a living room area, which we used for the temple area and so forth. And so we maintained our program, our Southern program. Now, we were able to get a car on loan from, I can't remember who arranged that. That may have been Navani. I think Navani arranged that first car. Later on, we met another family who was tremendous. I have to speak about them. They're actually here now, and they're disciples of Gurudev. So I'll talk about them a little bit later on. But Navani arranged for us to have a car so that we could be mobile without being dependent on others. So that didn't happen right away, but we ended up getting a car. But so anyways, we maintained doing our program every morning, Mangal Arati, everything else in the thing. We had to be obviously very quiet because we had neighbors now and everything else. Brajalila also came back to America to do the marathon. During that time, we met a few interested people just from the neighborhood. And one of them was a young lady who lived in the complex. And she worked, and she was a single lady. I can't not remember her name, and she never took initiation or anything, but she took an interest. And she started coming over. The problem was, Brajalila had gone back to America, and here I am now single Grahasta man and 2 brahmacharis. So this is not, something we're going to entertain, right? And especially, I remember Harikatha Muni, he was very vocally demonstrative about the fact that we can't have this lady coming here, right? But she would come to the Mangal Arati, and we'd have to crack the front door, and, we would all be in, we would allow her to come in. She always wore her karmi clothes, like she would come and she would pretty much just, I guess, wear like kind of night clothes, sleeping clothes, and she would cover herself, obviously, and we would do the program. Then she'd go back, she would get ready for work and come back and take a little prasad at the temple, right? So we accommodated it, long story short, we accommodated it, and, she did this for quite some time. Then we had another gentleman come by who was actually a white body gentleman, and I can't remember what exactly he did or what, where he worked or anything, but he also used to come by from time to time. So we had little stragglers like that would come by. The girl, because she lived in the complex, she was coming regularly. So I remember Harikatha Muni, he really got to a point of being uncomfortable with the idea of her coming. I'm not going down the track of, brahmachari issues and these things. So, but anyways, I had to be kind of, sensitive to that idea that, Ishwara and Harikatha Muni are brahmacharis, and that this is, we're in a small space, and this is just, even though I also have to be sensitive to the fact that preaching is preaching. And if this soul, has somehow or another come in contact, it's not an accident. And I used to have to constantly remind them of that that you don't come to bhakti haphazardly, either from previous sukriti or from some agyata sukriti in this life or whatever it might be. If you have a chance to come to the process, that cannot be ignored. And we can't get on the bodily platform so much that we somehow or another block a soul's opportunity to move forward on the path of real life. So, I had to get kind of stern on that point, that, yeah, I understand brahmachari life, etc. And even my wife's, my former wife at that time's not here, so I'm also, some reluctant, but at the same time, this is, we're not going to deny this soul who's showing a consistent interest, on that basis. And we're three, grown men here, and we have to be, protective of each other, obviously, and so forth. So anyways, I'll tell a little funny story about her. So she was coming on a regular basis, everything. Now, when she would go home to change to go to work, she obviously wore work clothes, and they were a little, she's not covered the same way she is in the morning. So that became a whole nother source of, for the brahmacharis, that was another big thing. No, but she's coming and she's not dressed properly and this and that. So I said, look, we'll work on that. So I ended up telling, I think, Pushpa or one of the Indian ladies about the groves coming and, so forth, so on. So they gave me a couple of saris. So I was like, oh, great. So this will help to quell the situation and make things work out. So I got back and I gave her the saris and everything and told her, well, look, when you come, if you want, over your regular work clothes, you can tie the sari, right? So the next day, she came to the temple and she had the sari, and obviously she didn't know how to tie a sari, right? So she had tied the sari kind of like you wrap a mummy, right? So her arms were just sticking out through a little slot, and her whole body was wrapped in the sari, and she knew it goes over your head. So whatever was remaining, it came over her head like this, but she looked like a mummy, right, with just the arm coming over. So I said, well, listen, I don't know how to tie a sari either, right? So, and we didn't have any, Indian families living right there in the complex or anything. So, I tried to take a dhoti and show her how to tie whatever I did understand. So long story short, oh no, I actually tied the dhoti thing to give her a demonstration. So she was trying to put the sari on. So then I took apart the sari and I started wrapping it, and Raivata Muni went crazy. He said, Prabhu, you can't touch her, you can't touch her, right? So it was so funny because it was the extreme nature of, I don't know, kind of quasi-brahmachari life, of that time and so forth and so on. So anyways, but I had to, realize that that's a fact. I have to be careful here. So I told her, again, just do this basic wrap and so forth. So anyway, long story short, she got the gist of it. It wasn't perfect, but she was covered. That kept the brahmacharis okay, everything. And she regularly came. So this was, as long as we were in that apartment, she was coming on a regular basis. So she got a very heavy dose between prasadam, harinam. She learned the mantra. She ended up getting beads. She didn't get initiated or anything, but she ended up chanting and everything else. And I can't remember if Rajalila, when Rajalila got back, Rajalila met her because, no, I think by the time Rajalila got back, we had shifted and we had gotten the house, right? So I think Rajalila comes back and we're in the house. I'm hoping that chronology is right. But anyway, so after being in the apartment for some time, the tension was getting really, really incredible. Remember, we can't go out regularly preaching like we did. We didn't have initially a vehicle until Navneet arranged for us to have one on loan temporarily from one of the Indian families. And so we were just stuck in a one-bedroom apartment for a good part of the day. You could go out and jump and walk around, but it wasn't easily accessible like the house would be in the future to downtown. So, and Mr. Rao, his family had come. Yeah, so now his schedule was a little more busy and he had to accommodate his family and so forth. So he would invite us over regularly. He'd come pick us up, bring us to his house for prasad and things like that. But the tension was very, very great because we could not go out preaching. And, there was some, back and forth sometimes, especially between Ishwara and Harikatha Muni. They stayed in the same room, and so it was a little bit challenging. Anyways, moving to the next phase, which I had jumped to earlier in the last video, was that in one of the communities there, Navneet and Asha Patel, they had given us a house that they owned, which had previously been rented, but the people had moved out. So they gave us that house to use for our temple. And I think I had narrated in the previous number 8, I had narrated about that house, where it was located. It's sort of a enclave of Indian families, Gujarati Indian families, and it was located right next to, adjacent to, you could actually look out the back window, there was a fence, and then it was the place that was the Hindu temple there. So we would actually hear the bhajans coming out of the temple in the evening, and vice versa. They would hear our Sundar Arti, and I'm sure the Pujari Ji, he would hear our Mangal Arti in the morning. So, that turned out to be really, really wonderful for us, because now we had our own place. It was sizable. We had 3 bedrooms there, nice kitchen, a nice courtyard, and in the back of the courtyard, there were avocado and mango trees. And I already mentioned before that in that part of Africa, they grow in abundance. So, you could go out any given day, just pick mangoes, everything else, and, come in and we'd offer them and have them, avocados as well. So anyways, and then we had a little front veranda area as well. And I remember every day right before Sundarati, after we'd come back from going on Sankirtan or anything, we would sit there, we would do bhajans from the songbook, because we were trying to get all the devotees to learn all the songs in the songbook and everything. And the Indian families would come out. This was around 5 o'clock. We'd have Sundarati around 7. But we would sit on the veranda, we would chant bhajans, and all the Indian families, when you look down the block, all the Gujarati families, and this is a popular thing, it must be there in Gujarat as well, but they have these swings, and they put them on their front porches, and they come out in the evenings right after dinner, and they sit and they swing on these swings. So we would come out and do our bhajans, and all the families would come out, and they would sit on their swings, and they would just, be enjoying the devotees sitting and chanting and so forth, because, we chanted loud enough you could hear it, throughout the little block and everything there. So, and I hope if devotees have missed the narration in this one about that house, how we got it, etc., you can refer to number 8, I think, number 7. It is the last narration before this one. It's about Zambia, and it will give you the background on how we got this house from Navneet, Asha Patel, etc. So now this is where I was able to jop a walk every day into town. We began our preaching now. Mahamantra Prabhu has now come, right? So now Mahamantra has come. Harikatha Muni has gone back to the States. Ishwara Prabhu went back to Nigeria, but Mahamantra had come. And we had been preaching a little bit because we were able to get out into some townships and everything else because we had a vehicle now. And we made some devotees. And I mentioned those first devotees were Mahajan Prabhu and Sankirtan. And Sankirtan's wife, those were the first devotees we made. And then Rishi Kumar was the next devotee that we made. So these were the first, sort of 3 local devotees who were staunch. They moved into the temple, shaved up. Obviously, they got initiated down the line here. So this was a strong crew to be able to go out and preach on a regular basis. So we were doing that. We were going out, preaching on a regular basis and everything. We started sometimes sending them out to preach separately, and then we would go do other preaching. Like I mentioned, when we would go up to the university, sometimes we would take Mahajan, Rishi Kumar, and Sankirtan as well. And a lot of times we would, send them out for book distribution and so forth, or township preaching, and then we would go up to the university, et cetera, et cetera. Sankirtan's wife, she really liked to cook and everything, so sometimes she would stay back and do cooking. So when we got back, there was a lot of cooking that was done. What about food in Zambia overall? Well, I explained already about how it was going to do the programs at the different Indian communities. But the local food source was based around something called nshima. What is nshima? It's essentially corn that has been milled down into like a grain, or like a, not quite a flour, but like a grain, like really grainy. that's taken and it's stirred in boiling water until it thickens into like a paste, right? I don't know if paste is the best word, but it thickens up, and so now you have this kind of cornmeal, mashed potatoes, lack of a better word, and that could be eaten with any kind of vegetable sabji. So the devotees loved nshima so much that we always had to have it as part of our meals every evening, no matter what, Brajalila and Sankirtan's wife cooked and everything, they had to have nshima. That had to be part of the mix. So we also started eating nshima. It was not altogether bad and everything. And so now we were really happy because now there was this steady thrust of devotees. We were preaching, of course, my mantra having come, that was, really, I was really happy because, we had such a long-standing friendship and had been through preaching so much together. We were really getting a lot of things done. Now we started to travel out a little more as well. We would go to Indola and do programs. And when we would go to Indola, I think I mentioned there were two Hindu temples there. The newer temple, the bigger temple, and then the smaller Brijabasi type temple. We would always do our programs in that smaller temple. For one, they had a nice picture of Mahaprabhu, and for two, they were very much more into hearing Harikatha really than in the bigger temple. The bigger temple was more of a social gathering and so forth, so on. And I mentioned due to language issues as well, that, the elders would come to programs and, they really didn't understand English as well, and my Hindi was not very good. So it was, and they speak Gujarati also. So, it just wasn't a good overall combination. So we would go there, and then we would go to the townships and go preaching. We would go all the way down to Lusaka also. And when we went down to Lusaka, Radhe Radhe Mohanlal Patel, we would still go and do house programs there and things like that. But we met one family, and I think this is a good place to bring up this family. So I met one family there, and this is where we would always stay when we went to Lusaka. Because I mentioned when we first went to Lusaka, we stayed with Mr. Patel, that, his wife, I guess from all the previous experience of devotees coming, they would accommodate, but the atmosphere wasn't as, open, so to speak, and I don't want to make it sound like it was bad either, because, they never not hosted if we needed. They never not treated us really nicely. And the children especially, they were teenagers. And they were very nice. His daughter, his sons, they ran a store. And they were always really nice to us. But they were very much into Karmi life. I mean, they partied and discoed and everything else. So, anyway. But they arranged for us to stay with this gentleman named Kantilal Patel. And his wife's name was Mira. Right? Or Mirabai. So, we went and we met them, and they were a very humble family. His brother owned a house, and in back of that house there was a smaller cottage, and the brother used to rent the house in the front, and Kantilal Patel, his wife, and he had children. They were small, Dhruva, Dave, and Mandankini. So I don't actually remember when Mandankini was born, but I remember the two boys. And so we would go down and we would always stay with them. And this family, I can't begin to describe. I mean, I owe so much to them in terms of what they did to help us in Zambia. They were a very humble family. He used to run a shop where he repaired shoes and bags and things like that. So a very humble family. It wasn't one of the big businesses and very wealthy and everything. But whenever we would go down to Lusaka to go preaching and we would stay there, they would shift the kids to sleep in one place, and we would sleep in a room that they had designated as almost like the devotee visit room. So every time we went down there, we would stay there. So I remember the very first trip that we went down and we were going to meet them and everything. What did we drive down there? Oh, the car that had been lent to us, it was a Renault. And Renault is not a popular car in America, so nobody may know what it is, but we had a little blue Renault, and it was a stick shift car. And if you do know what a Renault is, the stick shift was like a handle that you went in and out with, right? So it was a really weird little car, but anyways, it was our only transportation. So we drove the Renault down to Lusaka, and I think It was just me and Mom Mantra. I think Brangelina may have stayed on this trip. I can't remember. But we went down and we stayed with them. And one of the things that her initiated name now is Manorama, so I'm going to call her by initiated name Manorama. And one of the things that she could do was to cook like anything. The whole Gujarati community cooking was excellent. I'll describe something about Asha's Patel's cooking as well, but Manorama, her cooking was outstanding. So whenever we would come, I would go and meet Kanti Lal Prabhu, whose name now is Krishna Kanti. He's the head Pujari in New Vrindavan right now. So, his name is Harikatha or Krishna Kanti Prabhu. So anyway, I went to go to his shop and I would spend time in there and, kind of speak to him Harikatha and wait till he finished for the day. Then he had a yellow station wagon. That was his car. So, I would go to work with him in the morning and hang out with him, everything. Then, at the end of his working day, because when he would go to work, what I would do is I would go from shop to shop down there to various Indian families, and I would get donations and do preaching and what have you. So then I would come back and stay with him in the shop for some time. And then we would drive back to his home, but we would always stop in the market and pick up fresh corn. So the very first time he did this, I thought, okay, well, maybe for the evening prasadam, we're going to have corn on the cob or something, So he takes the corn, he stops in another place and he picks up fresh milk. That's the other thing. So he drives back, we get back to the house, and Manorama, she's already prepared these kind of crispy puris. I don't know what the actual, methi puri maybe it's called, but it's a puri which is not a soft puri, from frying, but it's crispy and it's really nice. And she's prepared kheer, sweet rice, and she makes a sabji out of gram flour, bell peppers, and spices, and that was incredible. I don't know what it's called. I often tried to do it and would always mess it up. And then she would also make other kinds of sabjis, eggplant, potatoes, or everything she made was outstanding. But in the evening, she would make this dish where she would peel the corn off the cob, ghee, mustard seeds, cumin, and everything. So she would cook up the corn in that, the kernels off the cob. Then she would get fresh milk, pour the milk into that, and then kind of blend it together. Then she would take save. Save is like gram flour, which is really thin and it's fried. I don't know if there is an English name for it. If devotees have ever gone to the Indian stores, they have different kinds of chevra and save. So save and gatya, they're all made from gram flour, the save and the gatya. But the save is really thin and it's crispy, right? So she would put a bowl of that down. Then she would take the hot corn, she put the hot corn that she had made with the milk in a bowl. Then she would take the save and you could pour it on top. And the combination was incredible. The combination was absolutely incredible. And then afterwards, she would bring out the kheer, which would be nice and cold and, oh my gosh. So anyways, I'm getting food drunk here thinking about all this kind of prasadam. Anyway, so, that would be our preaching to Lusaka. So we would regularly go down to Lusaka and do preaching like that. So I think we're getting close to our 1 hour kind of time frame, and I want to keep everything within an hour if I could. So maybe I'll tell one other story, because it doesn't end on a bad note. It ends on a good note, even though there's a little bit of a harrowing experience. So anyway, now we had become used to driving up and down the highway. It's about 4 or 5 hour drive, as I mentioned, from Lusaka back up to Kitwe. And we'd be preaching and doing things in between. So one morning, we were going down to Ndola. And I think we were going down, I can't remember what for, maybe just to pick up something. We weren't doing a preaching program. But we did a whole morning program at the temple. We had class. And that morning, for breakfast, we had yogurt, right? We had fresh yogurt made. We had, Ma Mantra could bake bread, right? So he would bake this whole wheat bread and we would take it hot with the yogurt, right? So we had that bread with honey or something and butter, and we had the yogurt. And so we ate a nice amount of everything. And then me and Rajalila got in the Renault and we were headed out to go to Ndola. So we started driving, and even though we would get up in the morning and chant our prescribed rounds, the idea was anytime you could, you chant. So we were chanting, and it was not a good habit to chant and drive. And I don't do that so much right now. So anyways, long story short, we're driving on the road, and we're chanting, Rajalila's chanting, I'm chanting, and I got my bead bag in my right hand, and Hare Krishna, and I'm shifting the gears, so this is also not good, right? But anyways, we're chanting. We've just taken breakfast. It's about 8:30, and we've got the window cracked in the car because it's a little cool out. We're getting this breeze. So what can happen. You start chanting, and you start closing your eyes a little bit. Next thing you know, we're chanting, and I could, hear Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And I believe I'm still doing good on the road. Even the fact I'm saying I believe I'm doing good is not a good sign. So then, all of a sudden, while I'm in this, I guess, kind of half sleep state, I hear this like trees rustling. So I'm hearing the combination of the mantra and like trees going, So I'm like, this doesn't sound like the road, but I can't, I'm like in this little stupor. And then Rajalila starts chanting really loudly, Hare Krishna, Krishna, right? So when I look up, when I snap out of it, I'm driving through like the forest, and somehow or another we're missing the trees. We're going through, like we're off the road now into the forest, and we're kind of driving through, and we've missed trees and everything else. Then we have, boom, we hit something really solid and the car stops. And so now, I'm trying to put the car in gear just to put it in park and, turn everything off, just assess, check Rajali's okay, everything. So, and I can't get the car to go into gear. It keeps, grinding every time I try to move it. So I just turn the car off, right? So everybody sits for a moment. We get our composure together and then, open the door. We're okay thus far. I could see the road, so we didn't veer that far off. But we go and we look out, and the rock that we hit stopped us from going over an embankment that would have been a straight drop down. So we both just, I chastised myself for the chanting and driving thing, and then obviously becoming sleepy because we're getting up at, 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning, doing the whole morning program, everything, and then we're eating breakfast. And so just the whole thing, obviously it didn't make sense, to drive and get into that mode of chanting. So anyway, grace of God, people stopped, and what have you. We were able to get the Renault back onto the road, and also grace of Guru and Krishna, everything started up again and it went. So we went on down to Ndola and came back, and I told Pujapad Shantamaraj, Mahamantra at that time, what had happened, and the devotees what had happened. The Renault did have some damage on the front and everything, but it was still running and what have you. So, but that was a lesson learned about chanting and driving. So, I know even today, a lot of devotees do it. Even when you have your prescribed rounds chanted, everybody, wants to chant extra rounds and things like that, but we always have to be mindful. And my wife, Mohini Devi, she doesn't play that. When we go traveling and preaching, she's always checking to make sure your eyes open, right? And, she won't allow me to chant and drive like that. If we're somewhere and, we're just going one place to another, I still have that habit because, we want to do chanting as much as we can. But, and especially, for in Gaudiya Math, there's 1 lakh Harinam every day. So, especially, even though when we would travel for preaching, I would always, chant 32 rounds because of the nature of the day and driving and all these things, you could not chant 1 lakh Harinam. So anyway, so the driving and chanting, that was a great lesson. And just also, managing your time better, because we could have gone to Indole and come back and taken prasad when we got back. I mean, there's just a number of ways we could have made that situation better. So again, this is getting near the end. I mentioned it ends on a good note because we learned a bunch of lessons and we're still here talking about it. So I think I'm going to end it there, and I'll pick up on the preaching that goes on, because a lot of stuff does happen in Zambia. And I'll speak about when Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj comes and all the great things that happen when we go to Lusaka and we meet the president. A lot of good things to come. All right, Dhanavad Pranam devotees. Jai Srila Gurudev ki jai, Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Jai Rupanuga Guru Bhargava ki jai, Shri Nityananda Rama ki jai, Satchinandan Gaur Hari ki jai, Jai to my Shishi Gaur Gadadhar Shishi Radha Vallabh Ji ki jai, Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Radhe Radhe.